Stop that right now. Richard Blackwat's voice thundered through the mansion. He stood at the entrance of the living room, fists clenched, witnessing a scene that instantly made his blood boil. His 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, sat in her wheelchair in the center of the room, smiling for the first time in months. Beside her, Andre Silva, the driver hired just 3 weeks ago, was gently dancing to a Brazilian song playing on his phone. The 32-year-old held Sophia's hand delicately, slowly twirling around her wheelchair, as she clapped with a joy Richard hadn't seen since the accident. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my daughter?" Richard advanced toward Andre, who immediately stopped dancing and released Sophia's hand. The girl's smile vanished, replaced by confusion and fear. Andre remained calm, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Mr. Black, what may I explain?" "Explain," Richard interrupted, his voice dripping with indignation. "You were hired to drive, not to do whatever this is." He gestured furiously at the phone still playing music. "Turn that thing off now." Sophia began to cry silently, and Andre quickly grabbed the phone to pause the music. The silence that followed was suffocating. Richard looked at his daughter, then at Andre, and something tightened in his chest in a way he couldn't name. "Papa, please," Sophia whispered in a small, broken voice. "Andre was just teaching me to dance like the other kids." "You can't dance," Richard exploded, the words escaping before he could stop them. "You're in a wheelchair, Sophia. The sooner you accept that, the better." Andre's face twitched slightly, but he remained silent. There was something in his eyes, not anger or fear, but a deep understanding Richard couldn't decipher, as if the driver knew exactly the kind of pain driving his reaction. "Mr. Black, what?" Andre said calmly, his soft accent one Richard hadn't noticed before. "Can we speak privately?" "There's nothing to discuss," Richard snapped. "Pack your things. You're fired." Andre nodded slowly, but before turning to leave, he looked at Sophia one last time. "Remember what we talked about, little one, about the butterflies? Some fly differently, but they still fly." As Andre walked toward the door, Richard noticed something unsettling. The man didn't seem surprised or desperate, as one might expect from someone who just lost their job. There was a serenity in his movements, as if he knew something Richard didn't. Sophia continued to cry, and Richard knelt beside her wheelchair, trying to comfort her, but his words felt hollow even to himself. "Why did you fire him?" Sophia asked between sobs. "He made me feel normal again." Richard didn't know how to respond. 6 months earlier, after the accident that left Sophia paralyzed from the waist down, he had hired the best physiotherapists, psychologists, and specialists money could buy. None had managed to coax a genuine smile from his daughter, until Andre. As he watched Sophia wipe her tears with the back of her hand, Richard wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. There was something about that driver that didn't add up, something that set his analytical mind on edge, but not in the way he expected. If this story of prejudice and unexpected discoveries is touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what Richard was about to uncover about Andre would change not only his view of the driver, but also himself in ways he never imagined possible. 3 days after the firing, the Blackwat mansion had returned to its cold, silent routine. Richard threw himself into work, convincing himself he'd made the right decision. After all, he couldn't allow strangers to take advantage of his daughter's vulnerability. But Sophia wasn't cooperating with his plan for normalcy. She refused to leave her room, rejected meals, and cried every time she heard a car in the driveway, hoping it was Andre returning. The physiotherapists reported total resistance. She simply refused to participate in any activities. "Papa, why isn't Andre coming back?" Sophia asked for the 10th time that morning, tears staining her pillowcase. "We've talked about this, sweetheart," Richard replied, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. A meeting with Japanese investors couldn't be postponed despite the domestic drama. He wasn't suitable to work here, but he understood me, Sophia murmured, turning her face to the wall. Meanwhile, across town, Andre Silva sat at a small kitchen table, calmly typing on a laptop that didn't match his modest apartment. The screen displayed emails in English, French, and Portuguese, correspondence a mere driver should never have been capable of handling. His phone rang. "Dr. Silva?" The voice on the other end asked in French. "The university wishes to confirm your availability for next week's neuroplasticity conference. I need to postpone it a few days," Andre replied in the same language, his eyes fixed on a photo he'd discreetly taken of Sophia during one of their dance sessions. "I have a special case that requires attention." Richard had never bothered to thoroughly vet Andre Silva's background. If he had, he would have discovered that the man he'd hired as a driver held a PhD in neuroscience from the Sorbonne, specializing in music and movement therapy for children with neurological trauma. He'd abandoned a promising academic career in Paris after a personal tragedy. But there was more. Something even the most thorough investigation wouldn't reveal. Andre had known the Blackwat family far longer than Richard realized. As Richard prepared for another day ignoring his daughter's sobs, his assistant, James, entered the office with a concerned expression. "Mr. Blackwat, I need to report something odd," James said, glancing at his tablet. "The driver you fired, he didn't contest the dismissal, didn't ask for references, didn't seem desperate at all." Richard frowned. Indeed, Andre's calm reaction had unsettled him from the start. And maybe he already had another job lined up. "I did some checking, sir." James hesitated. "I found he has an advanced academic background. He speaks 4 languages, and there are records of him working with special needs children in European hospitals." Richard's stomach tightened slightly. "Why wasn't I told this before?" "Because you didn't request a full background check," James replied. "You said you just needed someone to drive." Richard vaguely recalled the job interview. Andre had been recommended by the employment agency as highly qualified with experience working with families. He'd assumed they meant as a driver. That evening, Richard returned home earlier than usual and found Sophia as he'd left her, motionless in bed, staring out the window. But this time, she was whispering something. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" he asked, approaching. "With the butterflies," Sophia replied without turning. "Andre taught me that some fly differently, but they still fly like me." Richard felt a lump in his throat. Those were the last words Andre had said to Sophia before leaving. Later, after Sophia fell asleep, Richard wandered to the garage, where he used to find Andre cleaning the car, softly humming. The space was now empty and silent, but something caught his eye. On the car seat, Andre had left a small leather folder. Richard opened it, expecting personal documents. Instead, he found medical articles on childhood paralysis, music therapy techniques, and handwritten notes about Case SB, Sophia Blackwat's initials. The notes were detailed, professional, and revealed a knowledge of Sophia's condition far beyond what any driver should possess. There were diagrams of exercises, tailored musical progressions, and a months-long treatment plan. At the back of the folder, Richard found a faded photo. A young man in a white coat next to a blonde woman in a hospital bed, both smiling at the camera. The woman had the same blue eyes as Sophia. It was his wife, Elena, who had died in the accident that left Sophia paralyzed. The photo was dated 6 years ago in a Paris hospital. On the back, a note in French: Dr. Andre Silva, specialist in pediatric neurological trauma. Treatment of Elena Blackwat. Richard dropped the photo, his hands trembling. Andre wasn't just a qualified driver who'd stumbled into their lives. He had known Elena, had treated his wife, and now, 6 years later, had mysteriously appeared to work in their home just when Sophia needed help most. Every humiliation Richard had inflicted on Andre, every harsh word, every contemptuous glance, now took on a different meaning. The man he'd so cruelly fired wasn't an opportunist exploiting a vulnerable child. He was possibly the only person in the world who truly knew how to help Sophia, and Richard had just fired him. The next morning, Richard couldn't focus on his meetings. The photo of Elena with Andre pounded in his mind like an unanswered question. How was it possible that fate had placed his wife's doctor as a driver in his home just when Sophia needed him most? Couldn't be a coincidence. Richard canceled all his appointments and ordered James to hire a private investigation agency immediately. I want everything on Andre Silva. Every document, every job, every breath from the last 15 years. Sir, may I ask why the urgency? James asked, nervously adjusting his glasses. I've discovered our former driver isn't who we thought, Richard replied, still holding the photo. And I need to know exactly who I've been dealing with. Meanwhile, Sophia's condition had deteriorated drastically. She refused to eat, wouldn't speak to anyone, and had developed a low-grade fever the doctors couldn't explain. The physiotherapist reported that Sophia simply closed her eyes during the entire session, as if she'd given up completely. It's as if she's lost the will to live, Dr. Peterson, the family pediatrician, murmured after examining Sophia. Sometimes, children who've suffered trauma form very specific emotional connections. When those are abruptly broken, are you suggesting my daughter is sick because I fired a driver? Richard interrupted, his voice laced with disbelief and irritation. I'm suggesting you may have underestimated that person's importance to her recovery. That afternoon, the agency's report arrived via encrypted email. Richard locked himself in his office and began reading, watching his certainties crumble page by page. Andre Silva had graduated in medicine from the University of São Paulo, specialized in pediatric neurology in France, and worked for 6 years at Necro-Enfants Malades Hospital in Paris, the same hospital where Elena had been treated during a research stint. But there was more. Andre had lost his own daughter, Luna Silva, aged 5, in a car accident 3 years earlier, under circumstances similar to those that left Sophia paralyzed. After the tragedy, Andre abandoned traditional medicine and began developing unconventional music and movement therapy techniques for children with trauma. The report included Andre's published scientific articles, citations in international medical journals, and something that chilled Richard's blood. A 2-year-old interview in a French newspaper where Andre expressed his intent to find other children like Luna and give them a second chance to smile. Richard picked up the phone and dialed Andre's number. It rang several times before a calm voice answered. I know you found out who I am, Andre said without waiting for a greeting. Why didn't you tell me from the start? Richard asked, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Because men like you don't hire former doctors to drive cars. You hire drivers. And Sophia needed someone who could be close to her without raising suspicions or expectations. Suspicions? What game are you playing with my family? Andre sighed deeply. Mr. Blackwood, your wife Elena came to me 6 months before the accident. She was researching alternative treatments for childhood paralysis. Why? Because doctors had already diagnosed a potential issue during her pregnancy that could affect Sophia in the future. Richard felt the floor vanish beneath him. That's impossible. Sophia was born perfectly healthy. Yes, she was born healthy, but Elena knew there was a genetic risk. She was preparing a preventive treatment plan in case something happened. She made me promise that if Sophia ever needed help, I'd do everything in my power to assist her. Andre's words echoed in the silent office like a confession rewriting the history Richard thought he knew. Elena had hidden a medical secret. She had prepared for a tragedy that hadn't yet occurred. "You're lying?" Richard murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's in her will, Mr. Blackwat, in the part your lawyers likely dismissed as the delusions of a worried pregnant woman." Richard quickly opened Elena's digital will on his computer. There, on page 17, was a section he'd completely overlooked. "In the event of neurological trauma or paralysis affecting our daughter Sophia, I recommend contacting Dr. Andre Silva, a specialist in unconventional therapies. His methods may seem unorthodox, but they work where traditional medicine fails." "My God!" Richard whispered, dropping the phone. James appeared at the door, carrying a folder of documents. "Sir, there's something you need to see. I found records of payments your wife made to a clinic in Paris. Monthly payments that continued debiting from a joint account until last month." Richard took the documents with trembling hands. Elena had been funding a children's rehabilitation clinic for years, a clinic where Andre worked as a consultant. "He's been watching us," Richard murmured. "Waiting." "No, sir," James corrected gently. "Helping, when it was needed." In that moment, Richard realized the extent of his arrogance. He had humiliatingly fired the only man his wife had specifically chosen to care for Sophia. He had treated as an opportunist the doctor who had abandoned a brilliant career to fulfill a promise to a deceased woman. Worse, he had done it in front of Sophia, breaking the only genuine connection she'd formed since the accident. Richard called Andre again. "I need you to come back." "It doesn't work like that," Andre replied calmly. "I'm not an employee you can fire and rehire at your convenience. I'm a doctor who made a promise." "Then what do you want from me?" "I want you to stop trying to control your daughter's healing and start participating in it. I want you to admit you don't know what's best for Sophia, and I want you to apologize, not to me but to her." Richard swallowed his pride like bitter medicine. "And if I do? Then maybe Sophia still has a chance to be happy again." As Richard processed the magnitude of his mistakes, a notification popped up on his phone. A text from an unknown number. "Sophia asked me to send you this." It was a 3-minute video. In it, Sophia sat in her wheelchair in what appeared to be a medical office, smiling as she moved her arms to a gentle melody. Her legs, though immobile, swayed slightly with the rhythm. Andre appeared briefly in the corner of the frame, guiding her movements with infinite patience. The accompanying message was devastating in its simplicity. "She recorded this last week when she still believed you loved her more than your pride." Richard realized he had lost far more than an employee. He had lost his daughter's trust, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he could recover what his arrogance and prejudice had destroyed. But as he watched the video for the 5th time, a different determination grew in his chest. Not to control, but to learn with humility. Perhaps it wasn't too late to become the father Sophia deserved. Across town, Andre hung up the phone and looked at the framed photo on his desk. His daughter, Luna, smiling in a rocking chair shortly before her accident. "One more, little one," he whispered. "We're going to save one more." Richard drove to Andre's apartment unannounced, the investigation report clutched in his trembling hand. He found Andre sitting on the balcony, reading a book in French, as if expecting the visit. "Did you plan this all along?" Richard said bluntly, climbing the steps to the small apartment. Andre closed the book calmly and gestured to the chair beside him. "Sit, Mr. Blackwat. It's time we talked as two men who love the same girl." "No," Richard snapped. "You lied about who you were. You manipulated my family. You used my wife's memory to fulfill a promise I made to her," Andre interrupted firmly. "A promise you never knew she asked of me." Richard tossed the report onto the table between them. I know everything. About Luna, your daughter. About how you abandoned medicine after her death. About how you've been using other children to make up for your own loss. Andre's face tightened slightly, but he didn't deny it. You're right about one thing. Every child I help brings Luna back to me for a moment. But if you think that diminishes my love for Sophia, you're gravely mistaken. How dare you? Richard began, but Andre cut him off again. Your wife came to me because she knew you'd never accept unconventional methods. Elena knew your need to control everything, to have scientific answers for emotional problems. She made me promise that if anything happened to Sophia, I'd find a way to be there, even if it meant lying about who I was. Andre picked up a yellowed letter from the table. Elena wrote this for you but asked me to give it to you only when necessary. With trembling hands, Richard recognized his wife's handwriting. He opened the letter and read aloud. Richard, if Andre is giving you this letter, it means our daughter needs you, and you're fighting it. Stop trying to fix Sophia and start loving her as she is. Let Andre help. He lost his own daughter, but he can save ours. Tears streamed down Richard's face. Why didn't you tell me from the start? Because you weren't ready to hear it. I had to show you Sophia's smile again for you to understand that not everything can be controlled or bought. At that moment, Richard's phone rang. It was Carla, the nurse, her voice frantic. Mr. Blackwat, you need to come home immediately. Sophia. She's gotten out of bed, trying to walk on her own, and she won't stop until Andre comes back. Richard felt his world collapse for the second time that month. I'm going home, he told Andre. You're coming with me. Not as your employee, Andre replied firmly. As your daughter's doctor. As the man your wife chose to care for her. And as someone who won't accept being treated as inferior for trying to save your family. During the drive back, Richard finally asked the question haunting him. What do you really want from me? I want you to stop seeing my color before my competence. I want you to stop thinking that because I'm Brazilian and drove your car, I can't be qualified to care for your daughter. And I want you to admit that you've spent 6 months paying the world's best specialists but fired the only one who worked because he didn't look like what you expected from a doctor. Andre's words stung more than any investigation report. Richard realized he had judged Andre not just as an employee but with prejudices he didn't even know he held. When they arrived at the mansion, they found Sophia in the hallway, leaning on her wheelchair but with her feet on the floor, attempting small steps. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop. Sophia! Richard ran toward her, but she raised her hand. No, Papa, I have to show Andre I did it. I have to show him I haven't given up. Andre approached slowly and knelt to her level. I always knew you could do it, little butterfly. But you don't have to hurt yourself to prove it to me. Will you come back? Sophia asked, her voice weak but filled with hope. Andre looked at Richard, who finally understood it wasn't about hiring an employee. It was about accepting help, swallowing pride, and admitting he judged an extraordinary man by his most superficial traits. Andre, Richard said, his voice breaking, I don't know how to apologize for what I did. I don't know how to make up for the prejudice, the arrogance. But if there's still a chance, I'd like you to come back. Not as a driver, but as the doctor my wife chose, the person who made my daughter smile again. Andre smiled for the first time since being fired. Only if you promise me one thing. Anything. The next time I teach Sophia to dance, you'll dance with her too. Because she needs her father, not just her doctor. And there, in the hallway of a mansion that had been cold and silent for so long, began the most beautiful creation. A family learning that love knows no prejudice and that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply accepting help from those willing to offer it, no matter who they are or where they come from. 2 years later, the Blackwat mansion had transformed completely. The Different Butterflies Project, created through the collaboration between Richard Blackwat and Dr. Andre Silva, served dozens of children with disabilities. Sophia, now 10, walked with orthopedic crutches and danced regularly. Her laughter echoed through the hallways of a home turned into a center of hope. "Papa, today we're teaching the new girl to dance," Sophia announced, entering the office. "She's scared, but I'll show her that dancing in a chair is beautiful too." Richard smiled, remembering when he thought it impossible for someone in a wheelchair to dance. Andre had become more than a doctor. He was the brother Richard never knew he needed. During investor meetings, Richard made a point to tell the truth. "I almost destroyed my daughter's only chance at happiness because I judged an extraordinary doctor by the color of his skin. My prejudice nearly cost Sophia her joy." The first graduation ceremony took place in the main hall, with 23 children completing the program. Sophia took the stage with her crutches and performed a self-choreographed dance. "2 years ago, I thought I'd never be happy," she said into the microphone. "Today, I know being different doesn't mean being less special. It means you fly in your own unique way." Andre watched, emotional, recalling the first words he'd said to Sophia. "Some butterflies fly differently, but they still fly." Richard had lost friends from his elitist circle who didn't accept his relationship with a black man. But he had gained a true family and a purpose in life. "I learned that prejudice isn't just an injustice to others. It's a prison we build for ourselves," he said in a national interview. "When I finally saw Andre for who he was, I didn't just save my daughter, I saved myself." The project now served 300 families annually. Andre published his methodology for free to doctors worldwide. Richard discovered that building lives was more rewarding than amassing fortunes. The mansion, once a silent tomb, now pulsed with music and hope. Richard proved that the best revenge against prejudice is turning it into bridges toward a better world. If this story has shown you how our judgments can blind us to the miracles before us, subscribe to the channel for more stories proving that human greatness knows no color or social class.